Hey everyone, what's up? It is Kirsten over at Katie's House Foundation and Temple View Capital. I'm here with Julie, of course. Julie, how are you?
Good. Excited to talk about Padsplit today.
Yeah, Padsplit is, in my opinion, awesome. As you know, something that's doing good and house hacking, right? Cutting up the house essentially and splitting it into different bedrooms, and then they do single room occupancy. So, Julie, how much do you know about Padsplit and what do you think about it?
Well, I obviously know that when you run the numbers and you look at one person paying $1,200 for an entire apartment with 3 bedrooms, and then you split that into 3 bedrooms, and you get maybe say $800 a bedroom or even $500 a bedroom, you're gonna make more than you would per the month, and you've got a better chance of having less vacancy in the sense that if somebody does leave, you've got, more people that can afford it, more people that are looking for that price range to live there. Some of the major cities, especially, like here in Chicago, the rents downtown are ridiculous. So depending on where your location is, I think it's a great tool for an investor. And I think it's also, nice that some people, just even having somewhere to live better than nowhere.
Yeah, so it's for working class individuals. That's how they advertise and market. And what I would like to talk about is that this week, I've had a couple people talking about evictions. And generally speaking, when something is new in the investor community, we all want to talk about the dollars and things like that. Also, people in the nonprofit community, they generally want to talk about taking care of the people, of course. And so like you are right now talking about, we get to help working class individuals. You can't be on government paid. So this wouldn't be for somebody who's being sponsored in some capacity by a nonprofit, like a veteran through Veterans Way, or even drug court, paying in that capacity, or battered women. You absolutely do need to have your own pay stub or social security, because I've checked into it. But let's talk about the eviction. I don't think enough people talk about what happens in Padsplit when you need to evict a bad single room occupant. And this now is really coming up. And I have talked to a few investors, and I don't know if they just haven't had a bad experience yet. And they tend to lead with, well, it's going to be reflected in their bad rating. So it's like Airbnb, where the host gets a rating and the resident gets a rating. And so clearly, if you see somebody gets a number 1 and they're a tenant resident, basically you would know that's not a good person to let go into your next Padsplit. So every host can see, I guess, this dashboard. So I'm hearing, okay, well, that's one way that we're going to know if we shouldn't let that person into ours, is because somebody else rated them. But then my understanding is Padsplit will report an eviction, and this is supposed to deter people from acting poorly. Now, Julie, as a police officer, do you think that a potential eviction on someone's credit is going to deter them from acting a fool?
Well, I don't think that people make their decisions based on something in the future. I think a lot of people are emotional. I think they make decisions at the moment, and it comes out of a lot of people's mouths when I arrest them is, I don't care. So I think it's hard to say that somebody's rating later down the line, because who's to say that they just won't use Padsplit again? That the eviction process is different in every state and every county. So there might be an easier eviction route in Indiana than there is in Illinois, or there might be an easier one in New York, or less likely to get an eviction at all, right, in New York than you would in, say, Florida or Texas. So I think when it comes down to, what is what is the issue? Does the person just need to go flat out? And what are our laws at that location, and what are our options? So, we talk about, we just need to get rid of them. We need to evict them. And I think every investor, as an owner, and as a, this is my money. I think it's a headache, and it's something that some people, it'll actually turn them off from adopting this model, just because it's so hard some places to get that eviction. Yeah, the money's good, and it's providing a service, right? It's providing a service for people that otherwise wouldn't have anywhere to live. But, how do you screen your people? And what happens when things go bad? I mean, and we talked about some of this before with other topics, but, you talk about people kind of, I call it the bait and switch. It's kind of like they fill out the application, they say they have a job, and then 2 weeks after they move in, they don't have a job. And what do you do?
And my understanding is that Padsplit is doing a pretty good job as a management company, bringing people in to fill these rooms and then screening them. And what do you do to answer your question? That is where I'm sensing there maybe is a gap, that Padsplit originated in Atlanta, and now they have several metros, and they're going to be, or they are actually here in Phoenix, Arizona. And you and I, of course, have an interest in having properties which are there in Phoenix, and I'm sure we will move forward with that. The difference for us is going to be that we have a nonprofit, and having that nonprofit, a housing nonprofit, and layering that, hooking that into the LLC and leasing that out. You and I talk about this, you being a police officer, and we've made contacts with the local police in advance to let them know, like, this particular location, you could look at the address. It says it's a nonprofit house, and it's operating as a shelter. That's how that house is operating. And so for you as a police officer, doesn't that make you, let's say that we have to call because somebody has been, like, in one example, yesterday, someone in the Padsplit group is saying, I've had this person in my house who she'll pound on one of the other 7 roommates' doors for 10 minutes because she, for whatever reason, wants to be a nuisance. She wants to be a nuisance. And everyone in the house is irritated and wants her out. And this, if you're living in an environment like this, you don't want to go home, right? You probably don't want somebody pounding on your door. So if a nonprofit were to call the local police, having already developed a relationship with them and said, hey, I care about people, I'm helping the working class. And essentially it's still, it's single room occupancy, 7 or 8 bedrooms. That's fine. Versus at Katie's House Foundation, currently, we can do either, but we do generally have 2 beds in a room. And I think we're going to, adopt this single room modification. But the question still remains, would you come over and treat it like a shelter and say, hey, ma'am, you don't have a lease, you have basically a rules agreement that these are the rules. And one of the rules is you can't be pounding on people's door. People are trying to have quiet enjoyment inside this shelter. Would you ask them to leave?
So anytime there's something where, again, we go back to where's the location at, but if we were just doing hypothetically, there's a nonprofit, it's not anything where I've signed a lease and I've got the, rights to this domain, that it's my domain, and that we have an agreement, a separate agreement, right? Well, that nonprofit takes that agreement and puts it in a different category, because now we're not dealing with the same type of business structure and the same type of rules. And just like when you go to get insurance for the nonprofit, you get different insurance than you get when you get a private residence. You get different types of insurance. And so if you can show the authorities that your structure is a different structure than the regular business structure that you would have to abide by with just a rental agreement, then it would allow me to give the tenant or whoever is supposed to be there, the right, I guess, to get, their shit together or get out. And it's not going to be, I can't do anything. You have to file through the courts. It's going to be, you're breaking the law and you're in the house right now. And if you don't want to be arrested for this and removed, then you're going to lose your right to live here, right? And we talk about other structures that are, sober living. We talk about, halfway house. We talk about people that are threatening other people with bodily harm or fire or whatever. Those people, it's one of you're putting other people in danger. As a nonprofit, you're given a lot more rights to the other people involved than you are at a Padsplit. So that's where the big argument is the big argument is, okay, well, it's just a regular roommate situation. And when I go there, if you prove to me that you have a toothbrush, you prove to me that you have your belongings there, I don't have the right to kick you out.
I mean, I doubt many people are even bringing up this nonprofit when they're saying, I have a squatter in my house, or I have, this crazy tenant, right? I mean, they probably never, if ever, say this is a nonprofit house unless it's clearly a public shelter, right?
Well, and that would be something where, like you said, we've made relationships with the other organizations in the community. We're not here for profit. We're here for providing a service to people. The profit is made on the LLC side because the LLC owns the property. Now, I'm still going to get insurance to cover for fire, for, anything like that, maybe possibly liability. Obviously, that's what the LLC is for. But I'm going to have that extra layer of that nonprofit that allows me to have more leeway in the sense that I'm running a household for sober living, for domestic violence, for all the other boutique type things that we've talked about. So it just makes it the biggest term, I guess, that big eviction word that we're talking about is the big thing that I think scares people away. And obviously it's put there for, I'm sure back in the 30s, people would get their landlord come over and say, get out, you're out today, and they finally said, you can't do that. You gotta give, somebody the legal process, the legal, what they're due, for, to try to defend themselves, just other than the landlord didn't like me. So, yeah. In that case, like I said, I go there as a police officer and I say, you're actually breaking the law by either alarming and disturbing somebody. You're breaking the law in the sense that you're damaging property, you're, causing a disturbance, you're threatening people. Then as a nonprofit, like I said, that's it's a different business structure, right? And as you know, because when you go to structure your business with the state that you're in, and federally, trying to get those rights that you get with a nonprofit, it changes the game.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And so on that note, I just want to let all of our listeners know that they can head over to housesforchange.com, which is the site if you guys want to learn more about taking our 12-hour e-class, and then getting involved with a nonprofit attorney that we recommend. Of course, we recommend that you check out everyone and anyone that is a licensed nonprofit attorney specific to your state, but we just want to make sure that people have viable relationships and know this information, because when something does happen like this and you can't get someone out and Padsplit can't get them out, then it's very frustrating. And those are the messages that I'm getting this week, a few of them. And I have asked for the housing agreement between the residents who live in the house and Padsplit, and I've yet to receive that. I've been asking for it for a couple weeks because I'm curious. I would love to just have Padsplit manage.
Well, I'm also wondering though, are they providing that for you? Or are you required to do that on your own from the state that you're in? Because if I provide you something that's good for Atlanta, is it going to be good for Phoenix? So I would think that that's going to fall back on the owner of the Padsplit, and the owner of the Padsplit's going to have to come up with some way of having that, and I think in Arizona, which another reason why we like it, right, is that the eviction process there is much faster than it is in the Midwest, I would say.
Yeah, 45 days is what people tend to say.
You go to some counties in these bigger areas, these metropolitan areas, and it could be a year, 12 months. So you're going to have your residents put up with this for 12 months. Now, in a normal situation, this person is in the house, they're by themselves, they're not disrupting, they're not causing damage, they're not, threatening other people that they live with because they're the only ones that live there. But, back to your other point that you were saying how, like you're kind of wondering how this agreement is written. We got to go back to the root of it, and you have to say, who's responsible, whose the responsibility is it for who and what. And you were mentioning the class, and why do we take education and we do things? We should educate ourselves before we get into this situation, right? We shouldn't buy this because we know it's a good investment, we know we're giving back and we're making money on it, but we're not learning about it before we do it. So that was reason, enough for me to say, yeah, we should push this out. We should talk about this. We should talk about insurance. We should talk about liability. We should talk about eviction. We should talk about, what the good of this program is, but we also need to talk about some of the bad. So yeah, I would highly suggest people go and they check out, education before they step into it. And we just happen to put together what I think is a great product for people to learn about this before they get into it, so that you're not just kind of blindly, oh, I know how to run an apartment, I've rented to people before, I can handle that. It is a little bit more of a how you said, you were talking about management, right? How do you manage the people in the building? And then
also real quick, two things, talking about like mental health or them having a disability. So to throw those kinds of words around, guys, that is a whole nother category too for, people. I don't know. You'll tell me about police here in a minute, I hope, how you guys deal with this. But my understanding is that if somebody is proven to be disabled, then those people cannot be evicted very easily. Even, in a non,
well, don't forget,
maybe it's a little bit different, and it'll depend on if they're at a public place or a private or whatnot. But how do you guys go about that? Because some people might just say, well, I have a disability, and how would you know, Julie, as a police officer?
Well, so when you have to think about it in this instance, you're calling because there's an immediate problem or there's something big going on that's not going to be solved between the two of them. Now, your example of this person goes around and knocks on the door for 10, 15 minutes just to be a nuisance to everybody may or may not become a 911 call. I would think at first it's not going to become a 911 call because they're just going to do what most people do and just ignore it and try to like deal with it, and they're on their own. But usually by the time the police get called, if you think about it, there's probably some threats that have been made. There's some verbal disputes that have been had. There's some other, maybe some property's been damaged. There's some other things going on. So at that point, we're looking at, okay, how are we going to keep the people in here safe? Because that's our biggest concern, right? Is we don't want this to get out of hand. We don't want this to turn into something. And I'm sure you understand in life, we try to go there. We try to be nice to everyone. We try to say, hey, enough is enough. Everybody do what you're supposed to be doing. Like you talked about before, kind of like a good resident rule. Stop being an asshole, stop being a, beep beep.
Yeah, be a good neighbor.
Yeah, be a good roommate, right? And when they can't do that, then you get call number 2. And you're on the same shift and it's the same call and you just went there and now you're repeating yourself, or you've pissed your partner off on the next shift because you already went there once and you didn't take care of the problem. And as you can imagine, 3 strikes and you're a bad officer, at least to your other shift, right? Because now you've gone there 3 times, and that's like, we don't you got to have a tolerance level, and I think for the most part, we try to talk to people and be a good resident, stop doing this. But when they've got a mental illness and they've got something, the wires are crossed, and they're doing this on purpose, and they are causing the problem, I think, we talk about, our different structures for LLC and for nonprofit. A lot of times documentation is going to go further in the long run, because if in fact you have one of those states where you have to wait the 30 days or the 45 days, that documentation saying that the officers have been there not once, but twice, but maybe 3 times, and their third is a report, a written report, because if it's not written down, it didn't happen. So if that written report is stating that this person is just doing it because of the fact that there's, a mental illness problem, or, something to the fact that they have no real good reason for doing it. And now we don't take opinion, right? We just write down what you say. So if you say, I'm doing it because I don't like them, or I'm doing it because, and again, there could be, things could change, right? They could start making, statements that make me concerned that they're hearing voices, or they could make me think that maybe there's something more, that maybe I need to get this person some mental health treatment, and that might remove them from the house for a little bit of time. And, that's where we talk, a little bit about how eviction is one part of it, but having these problems in the house is a different way of handling it. And you're, are you there to be able to say, knock it off, and they're going to listen to you? Probably not, because even when I show up in uniform and I tell them, everybody's got to be a good person here, what do they end up doing? They act good until I leave. So
let's talk about, where do they go? And shelter-registry.com. Just so everyone knows, this is a site that Julie and I and our teams, we have a couple different companies, have put together to make it easier for police officers and just regular people, or,
social workers,
caseworkers. I mean, that's, where do we go to exchange? Okay, this person can go to a homeless shelter right this minute. And so it actually has open beds and open bedrooms. And if you are serving, for example, even people in Padsplit, if your house is registered with Padsplit for, let's say, veterans or elderly women or whatever it is, if you have something, you can also put them on shelter-registry.com. It's intended really to be for people who maybe don't have a job, and it can have public or private shelters that are,
or they're ordered by the court, maybe to go to some type of, sober living, or some type of specialty, or, I mean, it could be as simple as, it has nothing to do with the quote unquote court or the judge order, but it has more to do with, I need this woman somewhere to go that it's female only, and that, she can only afford this much money, but maybe we can get her, some kind of like scholarship or something that we can, because I think one of the houses in Birmingham has a scholarship that will pay for a week or 2 until you can get back on your feet. Just that interim time of, I need immediate shelter and I need somewhere to go. That if you were accepting, like, obviously we don't do 1 month free like we do at the storage lockers, but if we did something where we gave you, enough, like you were required to show that you have income for, a job at this time, let's allow them to have, time to pay that with a scholarship or something.
And basically, Padsplit, again, we like them, we like what they're doing, but you can also, those same people that qualify for Padsplit would qualify for a house on shelter registry, or a public shelter. And so this is a public announcement that we would like, every public shelter, every hospital bed, and every type of halfway house or sober living, or other types of places where these people can go. Because wouldn't that make it easier for you, Julie, or even me as the, managing a house, to say, listen, you've got to go right now, and you can go to shelterregistry.com and you can look for an open bed, and you can go over there probably today or tomorrow.
And that's going to make it better for other people too, that maybe it's not so much that me as a police officer going over there to tell them, you need to go because you're the problem. I can maybe finesse it into, hey, there's another place for you to look for a better fit, because maybe whatever the fit is in the house isn't working for this particular makeup. This was the only place that they found, they qualified, but there are other choices out there that maybe, isn't male, female, isn't, just any professional, that can pay the rent. It might be females only. It might be more domestic related, more of a house where, you're getting kicked out because somebody keeps showing up and bothering all the residents, but it's not necessarily your fault. It's because your ex-boyfriend keeps showing up, or, something like that. So there's other reasons to use shelter registry. And yeah, I mean, it's obviously more for caseworkers, social workers, police officers to find that immediate bed, but it also does good for, like you said, we like the Padsplit model. There's nothing, that's a different type of structure as opposed to the nonprofit. However, this also applies on that side too.
Yeah, and you don't have to have a nonprofit to put your house on shelter registry. It's just, if you do have a nonprofit or if you do want to set one up, we, of course, as investors, believe in having an LLC and a nonprofit. And anyhow, that is what we're talking about today, is eviction and how Julie as a police officer sees that. And we didn't talk about some things that are in the paid course, but let's just keep the conversation going. And then if you guys want to catch us on the next live, we're going to start doing these on Fridays. It'll just ping you if you are subscribed to our channel. We appreciate you subscribing, because when you tune in, eventually the channel will monetize and the money does go to the foundation. And so we all just have to pull together in the United States and globally, right, at all these different levels of care. They're called the continuum of care. And so you have people who can't afford anything, or maybe they need mental help or other kinds of therapy, support, domestic violence, there's a whole other level. And then they move into a pad split. And then hopefully from a pad split, they move into an apartment, and eventually they qualify to purchase their own home. That's the dream, at least for our executives here at Katie's House Foundation. So we will catch you on the next live.
All right. Thanks, everybody. And hit that like button.
All right.